When the alien explorers first arrived on Earth, it wasn't a day of invasion or fear. It was a day of wonder. Their ships glowed like rivers of light in the night sky, moving slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break the quiet of a world so alive. Humanity didn't greet them with weapons or threats, but with open hands and hopeful eyes. Leaders gathered in every nation. Scientists broadcast messages of peace, and ordinary people looked up at the stars, amazed that they were no longer alone. When the aliens finally stepped onto human soil, their first impression was not of danger, but of warmth. They saw music in the streets, art painted on walls, laughter between strangers, and children waving at them with fearless curiosity. These small things confused them. In their world, emotion was considered weakness, a flaw that clouded judgment. But on Earth, emotion seemed to be the source of connection. The aliens studied the humans carefully, observing how they cried during stories, how they hugged one another after fear, and how they smiled even when things went wrong. It puzzled them deeply. To the alien scientists, humans were fascinating but fragile. Their skin tore easily, their hearts beat fast with emotion, and their lives were short compared to most galactic species. Yet, they created beauty in every moment they could. They wrote songs about pain and love. They told stories about courage even in defeat. They painted hope onto every canvas, as if refusing to accept darkness as permanent. The aliens watched this strange mix of strength and softness and made their first mistake. They believed kindness was a weakness. In their reports, they wrote that Earth's people were dreamers driven by emotion, not logic. They noted how humans celebrated together after tragedy, how they forgave easily, and how they cried for others' suffering. They didn't understand that this compassion was not softness, but strength born from struggle. Humanity, on the other hand, saw the aliens as teachers, beings who could help them reach the stars faster, explore new worlds, and understand the universe beyond imagination. The world united in excitement, setting aside differences for a future shared with these visitors. For a brief time, Earth felt peaceful, as if everyone was living inside a dream where all species could coexist without fear. But beneath the smiles and handshakes, some humans sensed the quiet judgment in the aliens' eyes. It was the same look one gives to something fragile, something temporary. The aliens treated humans politely, but always with a tone of superiority, like elders speaking to naive children. Still, humans welcomed them with patience and pride, showing that empathy was not ignorance. The aliens left their first meetings believing Earth was harmless, a gentle world that could never threaten anyone. They didn't yet understand the truth, that behind every soft voice was a mind that could build, survive, and rise again. They had seen humanity's kindness, but not its resilience. They thought they had discovered a world of dreamers. They were wrong. They had met survivors. The aliens came not as conquerors, but as observers, and soon their presence became a quiet part of human life. They walked among people in universities, hospitals, and cities, their sleek silver suits glinting under sunlight, their curious eyes watching everything. They wanted to understand humanity, every smile, every tear, every small act of emotion that made this strange species so unpredictable. In classrooms, they watched students debate passionately, raising their voices not out of anger but excitement. In hospitals, they observed doctors working tirelessly to save lives, even when hope was thin. And in disaster zones, they saw volunteers risking themselves to pull strangers from rubble, their faces smeared with dust but lit with determination. The aliens took notes on everything, recording laughter, arguments, and even silence. To them, emotion was noise, a distraction that clouded reason. They could not understand why humans felt so deeply for things that offered no logical benefit. Their reports described Earth's people as unstable yet fascinating. They were amazed that humans cried for the pain of others and celebrated even in hardship. The aliens could not comprehend the idea of fighting for something that might be lost anyway. To them, logic meant survival, and survival meant avoiding risk. But humans risked everything, time, effort, and even their lives, for the sake of love, duty, or belief. The aliens found this behavior confusing, even irrational. They watched as a firefighter entered a burning building to save someone who might already be gone. They saw parents go hungry to feed their children. They saw soldiers return from war and choose to forgive instead of hate. To alien logic, this was foolish. But to human hearts, it was everything. In their distant worlds, the aliens had erased emotion centuries ago. They had chosen order over feeling, peace over passion. Their society was built on efficiency. No wars, no joy, no heartbreak, just balance. And yet, watching humans stirred something unfamiliar inside them, a faint memory of what they had once been. Still, they convinced themselves it was weakness. In their council discussions, they agreed, humans will not last long beyond their planet. Their hearts make them fragile. The humans, unaware of the alien assumptions, continued to show their true nature, messy, emotional, and resilient. They disagreed, forgave, created, and dreamed. In every corner of Earth, life moved with rhythm and warmth. The aliens kept observing, certain they had figured out the truth about humanity. But what they didn't realize was that every tear they saw, every argument they recorded, every act of compassion they dismissed, all of it was evidence of a power far greater than they could measure. They were watching not weakness, but the quiet strength of a species that had endured every storm and still found reasons to smile. And soon, that truth would show itself in a way they would never forget. The aliens wanted proof, not of what humans said they were, but of what they truly were beneath the surface. So, they began what they called the experiment. It started subtly, quietly. A few power grids across major cities suddenly failed without warning. Communication lines flickered and went dark. Food supply chains faced strange disruptions. The aliens watched closely, expecting chaos to break out, expecting the fragile, emotional humans to turn against each other the moment life became difficult. In their logic-driven worlds, hardship had always led to collapse. They waited for panic, for riots, for humanity to crumble under pressure. But what they saw instead confused them completely. When the lights went out, people didn't scream or surrender. Instead, they lit candles, shared flashlights, and opened their doors to neighbors. In places where food was scarce, families divided what little they had among others. Streets that should have fallen silent buzzed with cooperation and determination. Strangers helped repair systems they didn't even understand. Engineers worked through sleepless nights, and students carried supplies through dark streets to hospitals. The aliens watched this unfold in disbelief. Every act went against their calculations. This wasn't chaos. It was unity. They raised the level of the test. Flood barriers were disabled in coastal towns. Communication satellites temporarily went offline. They waited again for fear, for selfishness, for collapse. But each time, humanity rose stronger. Scientists found new ways to restore order faster than the aliens predicted. Volunteers traveled miles to help flooded areas. Even when people lost their homes, they refused to lose their kindness. Communities came together like living organisms, each person becoming part of something larger than themselves. The aliens began calling it illogical cooperation. They couldn't understand why humans helped others with no reward or reason. They believed that survival should be about self-preservation. Yet these fragile beings seemed to survive through connection. What confused the aliens most was the emotion behind it. They saw tears mixed with laughter, frustration paired with hope. They observed people comforting each other, promising to rebuild even as they stood among ruins. The aliens' records were filled with confusion. Species acts contrary to expected behavior, one of their reports stated. Displays emotional unity under duress. They didn't realize that what they were witnessing wasn't just behavior, it was humanity's nature. When the tests ended, the aliens found their data meaningless. Every hypothesis they had built about human weakness had been shattered. These creatures, so quick to cry and so easy to smile, had just proven something extraordinary. They could endure pain without losing compassion. The aliens had tried to measure human strength in logic and control, but what they discovered couldn't be measured at all. It was something unseen yet powerful, something that made humans unpredictable and unstoppable. It was their heart, and that the aliens had no defense against. When the Galactic Assembly gathered on the great station orbiting a blue star, The hall was filled with voices from hundreds of worlds. It was the first time humanity had been invited to speak as a recognized member of the interstellar community. The human delegation stood at the center of a grand chamber, surrounded by beings far older, stronger, and more advanced. The walls shimmered with alien languages and holograms of distant galaxies. Yet despite the beauty, there was an unspoken tension in the air, a quiet amusement from the others. To them, humanity was a novelty, a young species still learning how the universe worked. When the moment came to address the crowd, a senior alien delegate rose, his voice echoing through the hall. "Humans," he said, "you are curious creatures, emotional, unpredictable, and endlessly fragile. You build art while others build empires. You sing when you should prepare. Tell us, how do you plan to survive among predators?" Laughter rippled through the assembly, the kind that hides behind politeness. The human delegation didn't respond immediately. Their leader simply folded his hands and smiled faintly. The silence stretched long enough for the laughter to fade into unease. Humanity's representatives thanked the council for their concern, their voices calm and respectful. There was no argument, no defense, only a quiet promise hidden in restraint. To the aliens, that silence looked like submission. To the humans, it was strategy. They understood something the others didn't, that pride never wins wars of respect. Words could be twisted, but actions spoke for themselves. The delegation returned to Earth with steady hearts, aware that the galaxy didn't believe in them. But instead of anger, there was determination. The mockery had not wounded them. It had lit a fire. Back on Earth, humanity continued its work, quietly, purposefully. Scientists pushed their research further. Engineers built ships capable of surviving conditions no other race dared to test. Pilots trained in silence, not for war, but for readiness. Humanity wasn't planning revenge or dominance. They were preparing to prove that compassion and courage could exist in the same heart. Meanwhile, across the stars, alien societies whispered about the fragile ones who smiled through insult. They saw patience as weakness and mercy as hesitation. But what they didn't see was that every calm word and quiet gesture from humanity was a form of strength. A deep, disciplined power born from centuries of struggle and survival. Humans had faced extinction, disaster, and betrayal long before they reached the stars. Mockery was nothing new. The assembly thought they had put humanity in its place, but the humans knew something vital. Storms don't announce themselves before they arrive. They kept their silence, not out of fear, but because they understood that the best answer to doubt isn't an argument. It's the moment when the doubter sees the truth with their own eyes. That moment was coming, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Months after the assembly, when the laughter about soft humans had finally faded, an unexpected disaster struck a colony on the edge of the Orion sector. It began with a power malfunction deep inside the colony's energy core. A slow leak of radiation spreading through the tunnels and air systems. The alarms blared across the settlement, and panic swept through the population. Thousands of alien citizens scrambled for escape, their emergency shields failing one after another. The atmosphere shimmered with deadly light, and every minute meant more lives lost. Rescue requests were sent across the network to every nearby world. Ships received the distress call, but most refused to respond. The danger was too high. The radiation levels were beyond safe limits. Protocols clearly stated, no biological rescue personnel allowed within the contamination field. It wasn't cruelty, it was fear. No one wanted to risk their crews. The colony's leaders accepted that help might never come. But then a single transmission broke through the silence, from a human relief vessel orbiting a nearby moon. "We're going in," the commander said simply. The message stunned the entire channel. The alien coordinators tried to stop them, reminding the humans of the lethal exposure and the regulations. The humans didn't argue. They only replied, "There's still time to save them." That's reason enough. Within hours, the human ship descended into the danger zone. The crew wore reinforced suits, each one designed for short exposure, not for what they were about to face. Still, they moved quickly, forming rescue teams and heading straight into the heart of the radiation field. They didn't carry weapons, only medical kits, emergency shields, and stretchers. They worked with steady hands, guiding panicked colonists to safety. The aliens watching from orbit couldn't believe what they were seeing. Through surveillance drones, they saw humans carrying injured beings twice their size, dragging them out of collapsing tunnels, their voices calm despite the danger. When one of their suits failed, another human would step in without hesitation, covering the gap. They worked until their oxygen ran low and their alarms screamed warnings, refusing to stop until every survivor they could reach was safe. By the time reinforcements arrived, most of the trapped colonists were already out, saved by the very species once called too fragile for the galaxy. The radiation storm eventually claimed the human vessel, but the rescue teams had already launched their escape pods, barely making it through the toxic winds. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the wounded, the story spread across every channel. For the first time, the galaxy saw what humanity truly was, not fragile, not foolish, but fiercely brave. They didn't act out of logic or reward. They acted out of something the galaxy had long forgotten, compassion that ignored fear. And that day, the aliens who had once laughed fell silent. For the next several days, the colony became a battlefield between life and death, not of soldiers, but of rescuers. The radiation storm had ripped through the settlement, melting steel and cracking the domes that once protected its people. Where most would have seen only ruin, the humans saw something else, a challenge worth facing. They didn't wait for orders or approvals. They simply went in. The first human teams worked without rest, crawling through collapsed tunnels and shattered corridors, searching for anyone still breathing. Every hour brought new dangers, explosions, falling debris, and radiation levels that could kill within minutes. But the humans pressed forward anyway. They found frightened alien children hiding under broken walls, their skin burned and their oxygen low. The rescuers moved quickly, wrapping the little ones in protective blankets, whispering soft words they didn't even know the aliens could understand. Those who couldn't walk were carried. Those trapped under steel beams were freed with bare hands, even when the heat burned through gloves. The aliens watching from their ships couldn't understand it. Why risk their own lives for strangers? Why show such determination when the odds were hopeless? But the humans didn't stop to explain. They simply acted, teams rotated in shifts, though most refused to rest. They built makeshift shelters, patched leaking reactors, and reconnected power lines by hand. Their tools were simple, their protection limited, yet their resolve was stronger than any technology. When one reactor threatened to overload, a group of humans volunteered to enter the core chamber to stabilize it. The radiation meters screamed in protest, but they ignored them, working until the readings dropped back to safe levels. Some never came out. Their suits melted, their signals went silent, but their efforts held the colony together. When the final fire died out and the radiation began to fade, the alien leaders walked through the ruins and saw something they would never forget. Human flags placed beside emergency beacons, and handwritten notes marking where survivors had been found. The survivors wept as they realized what had been done for them. Thousands of alien lives had been saved, not by advanced machines or complex strategies, but by human endurance and heart. The very species once mocked for being too emotional had faced death and refused to yield. When the smoke cleared, silence fell across every communication channel. The galaxy that once saw humans as harmless now looked at them with awe. The laughter was gone, replaced by respect and a quiet fear. For the first time, the aliens understood a truth that no data or theory could explain. Humans were not soft. They were something far more powerful, creatures who could feel deeply, love fiercely, and fight to the end, not for glory, but for each other. The footage spread faster than any news the galaxy had ever seen. Every alien world tuned in to watch the humans, their burned hands trembling as they lifted alien children from wreckage, their faces streaked with soot and tears, yet still showing faint smiles of relief each time a life was saved. The recordings were raw and unfiltered. You could see the pain in their eyes, the exhaustion in their movements, and yet behind it all was something stronger, a light that refused to fade. On screens across the stars, Aliens watched these fragile-looking beings move through fire and chaos with nothing but courage and care. There were no fancy speeches, no promises of reward. They simply helped because it was the right thing to do. The Galactic commentators didn't know how to describe what they were seeing. Some called it madness. Others called it bravery beyond reason. A few even tried to dismiss it as human showmanship, but those voices faded as more footage arrived. The images spoke for themselves. People sharing oxygen tanks with strangers. Medics crying as they worked to save lives they barely understood. Rescue teams refusing to stop even when their own bodies gave up. In one clip, a human sat on the ground, his suit torn and skin burned, smiling weakly as an alien child he'd saved clung to him in silence. That single image spread across billions of screens. It became a symbol, proof that empathy was not weakness, but strength in its purest form. On distant planets, alien citizens began to question what they'd been taught. How could a species so soft walk through death and still smile? How could they risk everything not to win but to protect? Empires that had built themselves on fear and control suddenly looked smaller compared to the quiet courage of the humans. Even the military leaders who had once mocked humanity began to study their psychology, trying to understand how emotion could create such resilience. For the first time, words like kindness, loyalty, and hope were discussed in war rooms. The aliens who had witnessed the rescue firsthand testified before their councils, their voices shaking as they spoke. They said the humans did not fight for glory, power, or territory. They fought to keep others alive. It wasn't a strategy. It was instinct. And that realization struck deep. The galaxy had many warriors, but only one species that turned compassion into a weapon stronger than fear. As the broadcasts continued, the perception of Earth began to shift. The galaxy's most underestimated species had revealed something extraordinary. That the true measure of strength wasn't how many enemies you could defeat, but how many lives you were willing to save. In that moment, the universe understood. Humans didn't need to roar to prove their power. Their quiet courage spoke louder than any empire ever could. The change was quiet at first, but it spread faster than any fleet ever could. Across alien worlds, conversations shifted. The same beings who once joked about humans being fragile now spoke their names with respect. In schools, alien teachers used Earth's response to the disaster as a lesson in courage. News anchors replayed clips of human rescuers walking through radiation zones with steady determination, calling them the hearts that refused to break. Even the coldest empires, the ones that valued strength above compassion, began to see that humanity's real power didn't come from their machines or their armies. It came from something far more unpredictable: their hearts. For the first time, humans were invited to councils that had once ignored them. Delegations that used to dismiss Earth's opinions now listened carefully when a human spoke. They were no longer seen as children in a galaxy of giants, but as equals who had earned their place through action, not words. Recruiters from advanced species began arriving at Earth, offering humans positions in peacekeeping missions and diplomatic coalitions. They didn't want soldiers who could destroy. They wanted hearts that could endure. As one alien leader famously said, "They survive what we cannot. They stand when logic tells them to fall." Everywhere they went, humans carried their quiet strength. In cold and distant worlds, they worked side by side with alien doctors, engineers, and explorers, always the first to volunteer, always the last to rest. Their empathy became a force of unity. Where others saw conflict, humans built bridges. Where others gave up, they kept trying. This confused many alien observers at first, but slowly, admiration replaced confusion. They began to understand that emotion, something they once considered a flaw, was the source of humanity's resilience. Earth itself began to glow with a new kind of pride. The people who had once looked up at the stars in wonder were now shaping the stories told across them. They didn't conquer the galaxy with power. They changed it with kindness. Children on distant planets drew pictures of humans in their school books, calling them the brave hearts of the stars. Even the most powerful civilizations began studying human psychology, trying to understand how hope could survive in the face of fear. It was a shift not just in politics, but in perspective. The universe, for all its technology and knowledge, had finally learned something simple yet profound. That strength wasn't the absence of fear or pain, but the courage to act in spite of it. And in that lesson, humanity had given the stars a gift no science could replicate. A reminder that compassion, when tested, was the toughest force in existence. The memorial took place under the open sky of the alien colony that had once nearly perished. The air was heavy with silence, and twin suns glowed faintly behind drifting clouds of ash and light. Rows of beings from a dozen different species stood together, soldiers, civilians, diplomats, but all eyes were fixed on the memorial wall. Etched into it were the names of those who had fallen during the rescue mission, most of them human. Their sacrifice had saved thousands of alien lives, yet not one of them had sought glory or reward. They had simply acted because it was the right thing to do. When the alien commander stepped forward, the crowd quieted even more. He was known for his arrogance, the same one who had once called humans too soft for the stars. But now, his proud posture was gone. His voice trembled as he began to speak. "We came to this world thinking we understood strength," he said slowly. "We believed it meant control, calculation, and dominance. We were wrong." His gaze lingered on the human flags placed at the base of the monument. "You humans, you are fragile in body, but your spirits endure everything. We thought you were soft, but now we know. You are the hardest species alive." The words rippled through the crowd like a wave. Many aliens lowered their heads, ashamed of how they had once viewed humanity. Even the reporters who had come to cover the event stood still. Their lenses focused not on the commander, but on the quiet faces of the humans in the front row, engineers, medics, and volunteers who had survived the disaster. Some of them wept softly. Others simply stood tall, eyes shining with both grief and pride. As the ceremony continued, holograms of the fallen rescuers shimmered above the memorial, each one projected with their final recorded messages, small clips of laughter, courage, and compassion. The galaxy watched the broadcast live. Billions saw the truth, that these so-called soft creatures from Earth were capable of a strength that no machine or weapon could ever imitate. It wasn't just about surviving danger. It was about choosing to face it for the sake of others. After the commander's speech, a human representative stepped forward and said nothing, only placed a single flower at the memorial's base. That silence spoke louder than any speech. It carried across the galaxy, echoing through news channels, diplomatic halls, and classrooms. The lesson was clear. True strength isn't measured by what one can destroy, but by what one chooses to protect. From that day on, the phrase, "the hardest species alive," became part of galactic language. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a reminder. Every time another world faced disaster, they would whisper it as a kind of prayer, a symbol of courage born on a small blue planet that refused to give up. Even when the universe doubted it most, years passed, and the story of the human rescuers became part of galactic history. What had once been a single act of bravery grew into a symbol of something much larger, a new understanding of what strength truly meant. At the Galactic Academy, where young cadets from hundreds of worlds trained to become future leaders, there was now a special section in the Hall of History dedicated entirely to Earth. The room was quiet, filled with holographic recordings, artifacts, and personal belongings recovered from the rescue mission. Every visitor, whether alien or human, paused before the central plaque that bore the simple inscription. They called them fragile. They were wrong. Professors used the event as a lesson, calling it the moment humans redefined strength. They spoke of how a species once dismissed as emotional and impulsive had taught the galaxy that compassion could be as powerful as strategy, and that courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply acted without hesitation. Young cadets listened in awe as they watched the old footage of humans walking through fire and radiation to save others who had once looked down on them. Many aliens who had grown up hearing myths of human softness felt their beliefs shaken to the core. Some cadets even began to study human culture in depth, reading about their history, their struggles, and their relentless ability to rebuild after loss. They discovered that Earth had faced wars, disasters, and heartbreaks, yet its people always found a way to rise again. It wasn't perfection that defined them. It was their refusal to give up. In every lecture, one truth echoed louder than any theory or law. Humans were not the galaxy's strongest because of their power, but because of their heart. Visitors to the Academy often stopped before the memorial plaque. The room had no grand music or flashing lights, just a quiet glow, and above it, a wide glass ceiling showing the endless stars. It was said that at night, when the stars reflected against the floor, the whole hall shimmered like a sea of light, as if the universe itself remembered that moment of unity and respect. Some believed that those who had given their lives in that rescue still watched over them, shining among the stars as reminders of what it meant to be truly alive. And so the story of the moment humans redefined strength became more than history. It became a lesson for generations. It reminded every being, no matter their species, that empathy and courage could change the course of the galaxy. Whenever a young cadet faced fear or doubt, they would glance up at the plaque, whisper the words. They called them fragile. They were wrong. And stand a little taller, carrying forward the legacy of the humans who showed that even the smallest planet could light up the universe.